Humans of the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today we're making a video. This is a tier list video for some of the most generic engines in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! I think a really actually pretty good way to classify this modern era of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is actually describing it with the emergence of all these really generic engines. Decks aren't that pure anymore. Some are, they definitely are, but there's just such a larger influx of decks, especially in that competitive top tier level, that are taking advantage of other generic engines. They're not pure anymore. We're finding ways to mix and match engines and make the best of both worlds. We've even heard some people like Patrick Hoban predict that at some point we're going to reach a point in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where everybody plays 60 card decks because engines in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are going to be just too good that you have to play just all the best engines in one deck and then go from there, because they're only going to get power crept and power crept. They're going to become more and more generic, more and more available, less and less bricks in them, and then it's just going to be wrong to just not play a giant pile deck. So we'll see, but as for today, we're doing our tier list on those. Going over the tiers real quick, just so we have a little outline here. We have S tier. This is play it if you can and don't look back. These are just, and then this is an engine that has to be so good that, like, if your deck can play it, it's just correct to play it. You cannot help it. It has to be there. Not too many are going to be in this tier, though. It's S tier for a reason. A tier, strong as poo with minimal drawbacks. These are still really good engines, but they're not perfect. They definitely have small drawbacks here and there, but they can definitely still be part of a winning strategy in the metagame. B tier, still solid, but just outclassed by A and S. Just kind of like A, but just maybe one or two more bricks. Has some tougher restrictions. You know, whatever it ends up being, maybe just not quite as powerful overall of output. But still solid. I think these decks are generally what you're going to see played in more rogue decks than meta decks, but I definitely still think can definitely be good on a regional level and even every once in a while on the YCS level as well. C tier, just not it, Chief. Super mid. These are probably engines that I would advise against playing if you're trying to play on a competitive level. They're fun and they can make for some cool builds and fun design-wise deck building. But I just think overall it's not going to be it. And then D, I hope there's no D's here, but we'll see when we get there. Just oof. These are just bad. They're just bad in every sense of the word. Hopefully there's no D's here, but we'll see. All right. Let's get into this thing. Starting off, we're going in the mixed order that it gave us. Starting off here with Horus. This is quite a solid engine, quite a new engine as well. I think for me, this falls pretty solid into A tier. I can't, with a good conscience, put in S tier. I think the fact that this engine has to play a mandatory one brick, no matter what, is it definitely lands it in A tier. Like, that's enough. S tier is supposed to be super, like, almost perfect, right? But I think the fact that, you know, this engine has to play at least one brick. Sometimes you play 2 or even 3 bricks if you're trying to play, like, a super heavy package. I do love the addition of the field spell. I think that actually could be low-key really nice, because the best card to open in Horus always has been Imsity, and so that card becomes 3, or even with Terraforming 4 more copies, so that's just more consistently opening the best card. Does make the engine lose to Droll, though, so it's not a perfect fix overall, but I really like the engine. It's expensive, but if I had it, I'd actually probably be testing around with it right now, because it really is powerful, and it's good at playing into the boards. It's good at helping making your boards going first more powerful. It really is a strong engine that definitely deserves A tier. Solid A tier, probably even the top of A tier at this point. Next up is Invoked. Invoked for me is definitely C tier at this point. I can't even put it in B. This is one of those things. This engine used to be the cream of the crop. This engine could have arguably even been S tier in the past when we didn't have anything just quite outclassing it. But now we realize, you know, Invocation kind of a brick. It takes your normal summon, which is definitely going to make it much less splashable in a lot of scenarios, because so many decks want their normal summon. They want engines that don't need the normal summon. And just overall, the output's not that good anymore, honestly. Like, it's decent. But it's just not good enough. We've got 1-card combos that make full 5 interruption boards with a bunch of follow-up. This card makes 1 interruption with 1 follow-up. It's just okay. So C tier for me. It's just not it anymore until we see some sort of support, which I do think is possible for Konami to come back, circle back around to Invoked and make it so that Alistair maybe equals like 2 interruptions, 2 follow-ups, you know what I mean? And then if you're going to play that mid-range style, at least you have to increase the ceiling of this engine, but for right now, it's not it. It's not there for me. Dogmatica. I think this is a solid B tier. I even think in some situations it could be A tier because Nadir is such insane value. Ooh, I'm actually on the fence. It's either like high B tier or low A tier. We're seeing this engine right now played in stuff like Voiceless. It's a cool engine, right? Problem is Maximus sometimes can be a brick, but if you're only playing like the Ecclesia stuff, then I guess you don't need to play as hard of bricks like Nadir and Ecclesia. Maybe Fleur is still kind of a brick. So it's going to have like 1 or 2 bricks no matter what, but there's no arguing how powerful Nadir is. That's one thing that you can't deny here, is that Nadir is like out of this world powerful. Not even just generically, but also like the amount of utility it has. And there are so many good extract monsters to be able to send off of it. You get a draw off Garura. You get a pop off Ventus if you're going second. You get a bounce off Malong if you want to play that card. There's so many more too. So I'm gonna put it in high B. I can't quite put it on the level of Horus at this point because the package isn't big enough and consistent enough to always be getting you like awesome payoff. But I do still like what it does for the deck. Plus it locks you out of like extra deck summoning for the turn, so that also kind of hinders how many decks it can actually be amazing in. But I do still think it's a really good engine overall. So I think high B tier for me. Zodiac's going to be a lower B tier, but still actually decent. I actually think Zodiac's now has surpassed Invoked, which is funny enough. But I think Zodiac is just one of those engines, even though it takes your normal summon, it is still an engine that threatens Zeus without activating a single card. It is an engine that can now go into the Armored Exceed line to get Interruption going first. I think there's a good bit here. Now, this could potentially be even better down the line. They have obviously Dryden, particularly for me. I'm not worried about Broadbull coming off the ban list anytime soon, but like Dryden and Barrage, both fully banned right now. If either of those cards come off the ban list a little bit further, then this engine actually could potentially crawl into A tier. I don't know if it'll ever crawl up into S tier again, but A tier definitely seems possible. I just think it's solid. I think it's particularly good going second, but I also think it can do some stuff going first, especially paired with some other things. So I think it's B tier at least right now, and I think there are actually some pretty cool rogue decks messing around with this right now. So you may say it's not really that generic, but as far as engines go that just take your normal and they just do what they do, you don't have to play like literally any bricks for this engine. You just play the Zodiacs, you normal them, you make an Exceed, you start overlaying, you make a Zeus going second, whatever, you make Armored Exceed stuff going first. I think it's pretty splashable overall, potentially for any list that doesn't already play its normal summon. So I like them. Tri-Brigade unfortunately has fallen to C for me. I'm going to put them high C though. I think they've been power crept so hard. And I get it. We've seen like Sprite Tri-Brigade be decent fairly recently, but I think they've kind of been outclassed. And this is also like currently right now. I think this is an engine that doesn't handle Nibiru all that well. I think this is an engine that is a little bit too slow at what they want to do at this point. Like you're getting a trap and setting that up and then trying to play on the opponent's turn, but doing that going second isn't too optimal, and the deck can struggle that way. I just think the Tri-Brigade's kind of been crept out a little bit at this point, and I think some of these engines have surpassed it. So it's C tier for me, but it's higher C tier probably. Next up, we have Unchained. This one's cool. This one's definitely B tier for me as well. I'd probably put this above Zodiac, but below Dogmatica at this point. Really cool engine. It's basically a Fiend engine, if you don't know. All you need to play is the generic Link 2 that takes any Fiends, then the Unchained Soul of Rage, the other Link 2 that is the Interruption one, quick link on the opponent's turn, one copy of Shavara in the main deck, and one copy of the Trap in the main deck. So this is an engine that's only 4 cards, 2 extract, 2 main. And what I like here is that even though there's 2 in the main, Shavara is usually not a brick. The deck you'd be playing this in is a Fiend deck anyway. So Shavara actually can act as potentially an extender or a card that allows you to dodge hand traps if you hard draw it. So it's not a full-on brick. It's actually not bad at all. So I think that's totally fine. I think that can be overblown. He's not really that bad of a brick. The Trap definitely is, but one card and stuff like Ubel basically in the OCG is kind of taken off as a not not all the way, but it's a really solid deck now because it hasn't had to, because this engine allows it to be. That's a Fiend deck that doesn't have quite the payoff that you'd want, but because it's just Fiend based, they're able to go into this and they're able to get 2-3 interruptions just off of that. And so that's really solid, and it allows a couple of different Fiend decks to exploit it and really raise their ceiling. We've seen Labyrinth use it, obviously Ubel now, and then Unchained itself obviously is going to use it. Vernisylph, man. Can I put this in Oov? I can't put it in Oov, but man, it's not good. I think the biggest problem with this engine is that it loses to every hand trap. Every single Vernisylph monster is like a -2 or -1 if you get hand trapped. Like, it's like pitch itself and another Earth monster from hand to do something, and what they do is decent. But if you get ashed on that, you went neg-1. You went neg-2 in the hand. Your opponent only went neg-1 in the hand. If you activate a second one and your opponent has like Ghost Bell, you literally like lose. Like, you have 1 card left in hand. Your opponent's still going to have 3 or 4 going into the next turn, and you have 1 card left in hand. It's brutal. They absolutely die to negation, and I'm not even sure their payoffs are really all that worth it. They neg too much, they discard too much, and their engine doesn't plus enough to make up for it. So I'm not about it. Adventure's A tier for me. I don't even think it's fallen to B tier yet. Even though the bricks are definitely what people are going to bring up here. Obviously, Fateful Adventure, Griffin Rider, or Illegal Knight, whichever you're on, and the Draco back, all being suboptimal cards to draw. I still have to sit here and say, it is what it is. You know, the engine, it's just too good, right? As long as you're playing a deck that does not need its normal summon, the utility of this engine is just too good. It's good going first, and it's good going second. And so, like, drawing the good cards of the engine, it's just so worth it. I'd put it lower A tier. It's definitely lower to me than Horus at this point, I think. But it's still good, nonetheless. Doesn't even take your extra deck slots at all. It's definitely a good engine still. I'd like to not have to play as many bricks, but I think it's still solid. Armored Exceed. I think this engine's slept on. I think this engine's, like, legit. I've been messing around with multiple decks. I've seen multiple rogue decks, like, really, really playing these cards hard. Now, I don't love that, like, you're probably playing at least one each of the trap and the spell. In the main deck, which they're just both bricks. Neither are great to draw because you get them so for free. But I can't deny it, man. Almost any XYZ deck that wants to add extra interruption to it, or, you know what I mean, just boost the power, there's no denying this engine really opens that up. We already talked about Zodiac. That's one of the engines that can abuse Goblin Riders, Sharks, really any kind of like lower rank. You're looking for like 3, 4s, and 5s more than anything. But anything in that realm, potentially even Utopia. We always know we're on the horizon of Utopia support. Konami's always coming back to them because they're a main character archetype. This engine just can end up in any of those types of decks. So I think it's cool. I think it's decent. I think we'll actually see it probably for a while to come because it takes such little investment to the main deck, just 2 cards. It's more so a heavy extra deck investment, but I think it's good. I think it helps you beat hand traps in a lot of scenarios too, funny enough. But yeah, it's a cool engine. I think it's actually being slept on a little bit. Kashtira. I have to put Kashtira in A tier. I'm not stoked about it because here's the thing. Like, the reason you would ever talk about like the Kashtira engine is because it doesn't take its normal summon really, right? None of their monsters really need the normal summon. That's why we saw like Speedroid Kashtira see quite a little bit of play. Obviously, Pure Kashtira is actually like a decent deck right now. And we haven't seen too many variants. I think there's probably just not been enough exploration with the weird builds yet of Kashtira. I still respect the engine. I'm not here to really talk about like exactly how many variants they are. I'm just talking about the engine as a whole. But I think the engine's good. And I think one of my favorite things about the engine, and you see this in the Speedroid deck, is that it provides a backbone to certain decks that otherwise like don't have it on their own. So like if you do get drolled, if I go special Fenrir effect to search, and you're whatever you grab, whether you grab, you know, Unicorn or like Scareclaw, or I doubt you're playing Riseheart if you're splashing this in as an engine, but whatever, and you get drolled and your deck kind of doesn't love droll, you at least now have Fenrir. Like, you have an extender in hand that you can hold for next turn, and you have Fenrir. You have an interruption no matter what, and you haven't even committed your normal summon. I don't know what the rest of your deck does, but go from there. I actually think it does a decent job at helping provide a backbone where, like, even when things don't go right, you can still devolve into like a like Kashtira control type playstyle. So I think that's really cool. Plus, you know, just Fenrir being in your deck by default means kind of like Adventure, how like it just becomes like board breakers. Like you're just naturally playing a board breaker, even though it might actually be a good engine card in your deck as well, is really cool. So I think that's really, really heads up. And also it doesn't have a ton of bricks normally if you're going to play this engine. Like Birth, if you play Birth with like without or not Birth without anything, but like Birth, but like obviously if you draw Birth without any of the names, it can be a brick. But other than that, you usually don't even play that many bricks. So I think I'm in on it. Plus, it's pretty consistent as an engine because you can play 3 Unicorn, 3 Fenrir, and 4 Field Spell if you want, and go from there. All right, Runic. Runic has to be the top of A tier, I think. I think for now I'm going to put Runic just above Horus. This engine's insane. Kind of goes in the same category as like Kashtira and actually all 3 of these. But like it's an engine that can kind of be the backbone of your deck for sure. But also they're all just utility cards going second as well. So like it's not like you're just playing an engine that just adds gas to your deck. It adds actual like utility and interruption and board breaking potential to your deck. At the same time, it's just a really good engine. Now, it's not quite the cream of the crop as of right now, but it's still an engine I highly, highly respect for sure. Bishel's for me, I think I have to put in B tier right now. Here's the thing with Bishel's. In a couple months, in a year, Bishel's may be A tier. Bishel's may even be S tier at some point. But I think right now we have to meet our expectations. We're just now going into a format where everything is fire. I can't expect Bishels to really do too much right now. Their engine is still decent for what it is, and they're good extenders. But the problem is they're not, like, one of the biggest things Bishels could hang their hat on is most formats have dark-based meta decks. Dark is just the most common attribute in the game. They would just be there. But without anything dark, really, aside from, like, Labyrinth in the like, a high-end metagame right now, you're not playing a deck with just like awesome extra hand traps anymore. These are just extenders now. So it's just a decent engine instead of being like insane hand traps that also then act as your engine. Orcus is B, but it's like lower B. It's worse than Bishel's, I think. Maybe even right now might be a little bit better, but whatever. It's an engine that's pretty bricky. It relies on other engines that really have access to a lot of discarding. But there's no denying the rotation and the utility of Orcus is still pretty solid. That's why we've seen them with Runic. We've seen them with the Horus stuff. They've been paired with like better engines than their own, but they still have some oomph. They still have some gas. I can't put them all the way up in A tier. I can't put them all the way in C tier. I think B tier feels right. Punk as well, also definitely ending up in B tier here. It's just been outclassed at this point, right? You have to play some monsters you don't really want to draw. You have some cool payoff, but once Chaos Ruler got banned, this deck really took a step back in terms of its overall output. So for me, it's just B tier. Still decent, still like a cool deck, and like could be a cool engine for certain decks that just require certain synchro lines, but overall, it's nothing insane. Sprite, definitely down in like the bottom of B tier now. I still think it's solid, but I can't put it all the way at the top. Dogmatic is probably too high here, I think. Something like that, maybe. But Sprite's cool. I mean, like, I still think it's solid, and it only applies to level 2 decks, but still, it's decent enough. I still think, like, Blue and Jet get you, like, quite a bit of payoff, so I definitely think there's still something here with this engine, and I'm going to keep an eye on it, because, like, if Konami comes through and just decimates Snake Eye, Sprite could be one of those engines that just shoots right back up to the top as, like, a scary deck, especially if Runic's still around. Therion's definitely dropped down to a C tier here. I think they're cool, but like it's basically just Regulus and the plant one. I can't remember its name right now. And they're just fine, right? They're just okay. They are, I don't know. They're like decent one card payoffs, right? Either getting an Omni Negate or summoning the plant one and searching any plant from your deck, which is pretty solid. Or not any plant from your deck, but searching for Regulus, being able to search that in a plant deck, but it's just not enough. It's one Omni Negate that doesn't destroy. It's a little bit weak. Yes, it can insulate some plays, but I'm not sure it's all the way worth playing like the full-on engine. I think it's just C tier at this point. It's just not impressive to me. Sky Striker, I still think Sky Striker's like decent. I think I think specific decks could actually make pretty good use of it. I think the utility of this engine is still kind of underestimated at this point, just because Strikers hasn't been a very good competitive deck for a little bit. But it is definitely still a solid engine. It can get you a Widow Anchor. It can get you a Shark Cannon for graveyard removal, especially in like a format like this. It can get you not Afterburners. Is it Afterburners? Which one's the one that pops a monster and then maybe pops a spell and trap? Like that's a decent like board breaker card. And then also if you're playing it in a deck that already plays a decent amount of spells to get started, potentially getting the draw on top of that is like also really nice. So sometimes just the bodies too, being able to get like Hornet Drones and just get multiple bodies with Kagari and Hornet Drones can actually get your engine started pretty well. And playing going second, even doing that, you can actually just, that's a 1-card SP Little Knight, so that still plays into a board somewhat. So I'm here for it. I think it's decent. I think you have to respect it. Somewhat, not the pure version, but I do think it's a small engine. This engine actually could be kind of scary for certain decks, for sure. And last one's Sinful Spoils or Diabell Star, whatever you want to call this engine. This engine's insane. Oh, there we go. Yeah, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I think this engine has it all. It has the potential to put you into... it's an engine that can get you into plays that are good going second, playing into boards, are really strong going first. That helps you get a lot of interruption. This is an engine that has basically no bricks. They have cards that are better to draw than others. Wanted is definitely the best card to draw in the engine. But like drawing Diabell Star, you're not mad. Drawing Original Sinful Spoils, you're not mad, because as long as you put anything on field, it's going to help you extend through interaction later on in the turn, and there's just nothing wrong with it. Now this engine also can be weird because sometimes you're going to want to just play just the like Sinful Spoil stuff in something like Rescue Ace, because you're just going straight into Hydrant. But there are also builds like the Fire King variant where you're going to go into Ash and then get it, the Ash and pop into Poplar, and then you're going to rotate into all these different Fire King plays eventually, which is still cool, but like it's not always, you don't always have to go that in depth. The engine's just too good, right? The combination of no bricks, the payoff for it, the flexibility of it, of just like, oh, okay, this one got stopped, I'll just use this one then. They all work. There's nothing bad to draw. I think it's too good at this point. I actually think it's a cool engine. I don't think it's like an obscene engine. I just think it's power crept enough that like it's too. I think the biggest problem about it probably is that it's too consistent. That like you're just too consistently seeing like enough cards from this engine, and with the engine being by far the best engine in the game, it's hard to stop. So we'll see. Still really cool though. That's my tier list. Let me know if there were any other generic engines you thought maybe should have been on this list that weren't. But that's all I got for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching, as always. If you want to see more tier lists from me down the line, let me know your thoughts down below. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.